Three, two, one. Hello, welcome back to Steel City Screams. I am Ashley Ray,
And I'm Brindamai.
and today we are going to talk about Saltburn.
What
Dun
a
dun
movie.
dun.
Dun,
What a
dun,
movie.
dun. No, seriously, what a movie. So when I saw the previews, I was like, oh, this kind of seems like a thriller of sorts. But I was not expecting it to be what it was, and in a good way, because there was a lot of shock value to that movie.
I when I saw when I saw the trailer, I was like, I didn't get like everybody's like, oh, this movie, like people are just talking like about the movie and how good it was gonna be. I remember watching the trailer and I was like, hmm, okay. And then when it came out, I had a certain like group of friends who know me. They were like, Ashley, you're gonna love this movie. You have to watch it. And I was like, I don't know. I saw the preview and I don't think so. But I watched it and of course I texted my one friend and I was like, you were right. I love this movie.
It's a
And then
journey. It's a
I
journey.
said, Bryn, let's do an episode on it.
Hmm.
And Bryn watched it and sent me Snapchats, and that was my favorite part, is your Snapchats that you sent me.
Gasping. So many gasps, so many giggles.
What a ride.
It was. Um, so yeah, let's kind of get into, the plot of things. We start off with the character of Oliver Quick, and he starts kind of talking a little bit, and we kind of get like little glimpses of things that are to come in the film. There were certain parts of the movie that when the actor Barry, um, just the way he carried himself in that movie, that I was like, whoa.
Did you ever see him in The Killing of a Sacred Deer?
I have not.
That's another really good movie. His acting skills really shine in that. And it kind of, I don't know if I'd say what reminded me, but his acting and character kind of reminds me of Oliver and Saltburn. So I think if people like Saltburn, The Killing of Sacred Deer is a good movie as well.
I will definitely look into that one. Um, yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Well, because another movie he was in that a lot of people don't realize right off the bat is he actually played the Joker at the end of Robert Pattinson's Batman.
I
Um,
just learned that.
yeah, and so I actually, before I watched this movie, I was like, Mom, Dad, have you watched Saltburn yet? And I kind of hope that they don't. Just because.
Yeah, my parents haven't watched it yet.
Okay, I don't know if I can watch it with them. I think it's just one of those movies that you cannot watch with mom and dad. They're gonna have to watch that on their own time.
But I feel like knowing my dad and knowing your dad, they would have such hilarious reactions to them to to the
They
scenes.
they would. And the reason why I know that is because I would, just sitting there watching it, blah 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 blah. And I know for a fact once we get to one part, I have a lot of feelings.
Yeah.
That part, it was wild for me. Um,
Mm.
but I can just literally see my dad being like, I don't know if I can watch this with you, because I watched some of Euphoria with my dad because I like binged it really
I haven't
fast as
watched
soon
it
as.
yet and I really want to watch it.
Okay, we're gonna have to watch Euphoria, because another thing that I definitely want to dissect is Jacob Elordi's acting career, and like what I've seen on the internet, what I've heard about him as a person compared to a lot of the roles that he plays. Um, I kind of feel bad for Jacob Elordi when it pertains to the roles that he plays for a
I
lot of
don't know
reasons.
any I don't know anything about him really. I think there was one movie. or maybe I just know him like as in Euphoria.
Mm-hmm.
I know he was in the kissing booth. I haven't seen that.
I don't think I've watched the third one. The movies aren't bad. It's cheesy fucking romantic comedy. So like it's kind of one of those like feel good movies for sure. Um
Yeah.
to my knowledge, I think those are the films that really kickstarted his career because after he did the Kissing Booth movies is when he started like popping up everywhere and like all of these really
Okay.
big projects. Um so yeah, we meet Oliver Quick. He's talking to somebody and we see little glimpses of things. And then it really opens to him going off to college, I want to say it was, or finishing college, because I think they graduated. That's something that I kind of had to like still figure out or still need to figure out. But he goes to school and he meets Jacob Elordi's character, Felix,
It's
and
supposed to be at the University of Oxford, I think.
yes, I think it was Oxford because I remember at one point Oxford being mentioned. Um, and so at first it's he gets to school, he's like honestly like being picked on by people, and he meets this one guy named Michael um when he goes to dinner.
Hmm.
And at one point Michael like flips out on him and I was like, that was really extreme. Like, what is happening? And soon enough, though, Oliver runs into Felix, and it's like their first real meeting. And Felix is trying to get to a class or something, and his tire was flat. And Oliver offered his bike to him, and he like it was like this like I thought it was an adorable little moment personally. He's like, "Oh, I love you. Thank you." Oh my god, that was a terrible accent.
I
To
liked it.
portray it. Oh, thanks. I'm trying to work on my accents over here. Um
Hello.
but so he takes his bike, he takes Felix's bike back to school after like dropping books off at the library, and then Oliver goes to the bar, like the famous pub near school or whatever. And I think another thing too is like I had to remind myself because I can't quite recall how old everyone was in the movie. But I know like overseas, like the drinking age is much less than where it is in America, and like a bunch of things are obviously different overseas. So again, he goes to the pub and he's I with Michael, and they're talking or whatever, and he's Oliver's just zoned out and looking over at Felix, who's with a group of his friends at the pub. And eventually he goes over to get a drink, and Felix calls him over, and he's like, "Oh, that's my hero." And he gets invited to sit with them, and he looks back at Michael, and Michael's like, you just see this look of like almost heartbreak that he
Yeah.
went and sat with them instead of like inviting him over or coming back to sit with him instead. So Michael leaves, and Oliver starts drinking very heavily with the group and goes to buy like a round, and Felix pitches in because he didn't have money, which we again, a lot of the stuff we find out was very calculated and heavily planned, which was fucking crazy for me. At the end I was like, whoa. And that's where like I definitely want to say the shock of the whole movie came in, where I was like, wow, this was so different in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
Oliver is very, I don't want to say weird, but he definitely has like certain quirks and like odd behavior, which a lot of people would end up saying is weird. He's a weird guy. And you gain that over time because of certain things. He's like spying on Felix and watching
Hmm.
him, and it's just nuts. Like I'm still trying to dissect so much because there's so many things, not just with the plot and the other characters, but with Oliver alone. With Oliver
Yeah.
alone, this man has so many layers that almost don't make sense. And there's like he gave a heavy side of like bisexuality. um does he have mental health issues? It seems to be that way. It's lies after lies after lies. It's stalking and people not even knowing that he's stalking them, like Felix is a huge
Mhm.
primary example. He puts up this facade, and it it's just wild to me. And Barry just like I cannot say enough, like killed this role. Just I would love to like sit down with him and like pick his brain because
Mhm.
of the performance in this movie alone. So,
Mhm.
yeah, thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I thought was interesting is like every time he was so Oliver was so quick to
As
like
his last
for
name
one
is Quick.
example to like when he had a thing with Felix's sister and the cut well yeah we'll get to that and the cousin told Felix, and then Felix approached Oliver about it. Oliver didn't even have to think. He came up with a story right like that. There
Just
was
to
no
please
like,
him.
so yeah, so Oliver tells a story about his father had suddenly passed away
Mm-hmm.
and that his mother, I think, like abused alcohol and just had mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
And Felix ends up inviting him to Saltburn, where his family stays.
That place was ridiculous. And when I
Yeah.
say ridiculous, like gorgeous, a
Hmm.
gorgeous castle
Hmm.
that I feel a lot of people would do anything to own, to be at,
Hmm.
to stay in. I was blown away by the cinematography and the set decor. It just everything about this movie was just not only was like I don't know, that's what I mean. I have so many emotions about it. I was uncomfortable. I was like giggling at certain points because there were certain little moments that were like adorable. Like Jacob Elordi was, and that's another reason why I want to dissect a lot of his characters in a lot of projects he's done. Because in a majority of his films, he plays an asshole, like one of
Hmm.
the worst human beings ever. And then like you look at Saltburn or Kissing Booth, and he's like there in Saltburn, like he has like little quirks of like those kind of assholey characters that he's played. But like even in Kissing Booth, like he was like the bad boy or whatever, but like he just has this I don't know. Like he just seems like he's such a sweet person that I'm like, this poor guy constantly has to play an asshole. Like, is he okay? Like, what is I
You
feel
know,
bad.
you know what though? But that just makes it if he's and I don't know anything about him, but if he's
Mm-hmm.
a nice person in life, that makes it all better.
Oh, for sure. And I don't know. It seems to me majority, because listen, I've met and worked with some interesting, not so nice people. And I'm sure many of us have, especially when you work in this industry. But I feel like people that have genuinely good hearts, that are kind people, when they get these horrible roles, and when I say horrible, I just mean like their character is just not a good person. Um, it's easier for them to play. It's a challenge, but it's easier because obviously you're playing a character. It's not exactly who you are, but you have it in you to do it. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
noticed that different things that people have talked to me about, like casting me wise, are very quiet and reserved characters, which I feel like I kind of am in general. But I would love to play like just this like awful, like worst person in the world type character. If it
Why do
was
you
the right,
go ahead? You're good.
hmm?
Yeah, you're good. I'll
Oh,
I'll tell you after you finish.
well, if it was the right thing, there's some
Mhm.
things that, I see and I'm like, oh, I would never want to play a character like that.
Mhm.
But you didn't like Avatar: The Last Airbender, right?
I didn't
Wasn't your
watch it.
thing? Yeah, okay. Well, there's a character.
See what I mean? And this is what I was about to say. I know you have the capability of being a mean person because you have such a big heart and you're so kind. But as I have said over a couple episodes and to you off recording, I know you have spice in you. And I know for a fact that you could tear somebody to shreds. So, okay, don't get cocky.
Okay. Thank you. There's
You're
a
welcome.
character. Her name is Princess Azula, and
Mhm.
I just want to play a character just like her.
I guess we'll have to write it.
Guess so.
That's how it starts.
And that's where it ends. I don't know why I said that.
Yeah, I don't know why
Anyway,
you did either.
my career, this is where it starts, this is where it ends. Okay. Anywho, Saltburn. Felix is a good dude, but yeah, there's certain times where I was like, ugh, I didn't like him, and even where people told Oliver, like, you're just another one of his toys,
And that,
or something like that.
yeah. His Felix's own sister said it. Um,
Mhm.
hold on one second. I have the characters pulled up because some,
I
oh,
don't know how to
Farley.
say his name. Okay, yeah, Farley.
Yeah, Farley.
Farley caused
Yes.
problems.
Um, actor's great. Character, he pissed me off, bro. He did. And you know what? Um, he's the one that got away. Dead ass. He's the one that got away.
Got
Um,
away.
let's be real friggin' honest. He's the one that got away. And if you watch the movie, you will understand why I said that. Granted, he Oliver got him into some shit and other things that we'll get to.
Okay, but I don't blame, like, it was weird because sometimes in a way I was rooting for Oliver when it
Mm-hmm.
came to Farley
Mm-hmm.
because his character just made me so mad sometimes.
Well, and see, like that's where it gets really hard with this movie because one again, like you said, like at one moment you're rooting for Oliver and you're like, people are horrible to this guy. Like, what the fuck? He just wants a friend. That's all he wants. And, you know, he lied to Felix about certain things, which of course we'll get into. And Felix was pissed. And, like, yeah, when that happens, when your friend lies to you, you're like, what the fuck? Especially when it comes to something like honestly really fucked up. You're
Hmm.
lying about shit that didn't happen that isn't like overall true about your life. And it's like, But then again, that's where you feel bad for Oliver because all he wanted was a friend. And then you have Farley, who I, in my opinion, he got really jealous of
Mm,
Felix
yeah.
and Oliver's relationship building. And then again, though, it was like a jealousy battle. It
Hmm.
really was. So he gets invited to Saltburn, and Felix did tell him, like, if we annoy you, or you just don't want to be there anymore, like, you can go home, but why don't you come meet my family, spend time with us, get away from everything, especially because you don't want to go home, and just all that stuff. And of course Farley's there, and so Oliver
And
gets
his,
there.
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're
Go ahead.
totally fine. You're totally fine, babe. um Oliver gets there with Felix. He was early. And so the butler, Duncan, was like, "Oh, like, you're early. Like, we sent somebody
Yeah,
with a
Eddie.
car." And I was like, "Why is this guy being passive aggressive?"
I
So
know. I was like,
you're being a lot, Duncan. Calm down. And so Oliver goes in. Felix sees him, and Felix is like, "Oh, like, just ignore him. He can be a lot, whatever."
he's the worst.
And he starts showing him around the fucking castle, and I was just like, oh my gosh, oh, gorgeous, gorgeous. um so they had to share a bathroom during Oliver's stay.
By the way, makes no sense in a castle.
No, and he was like,
I got
oh, like,
invited to a
go
If I
ahead.
got invited to a castle and had to share a bathroom, I would be devastated. Not to sound all like, I'd be like, you have this whole castle and I have to share a bathroom with you?
Well, and like, if you remember this too, he was like, "Oh yeah, like, we'll just share a bathroom if that's all right, because otherwise you'll be on the other side of the castle." Like, whoa, I'll be on the other side. I'll never see you. Yip de doo, or whatever. And I'm like,
I guess it depends on how far the bathroom is. I
I mean,
guess.
I guess it was just like, I don't know, convenience, I guess, was the point of it. Whatever. And so he has a little bit of time to himself, and then he eventually starts walking through the castle to find like Felix and his family and whatnot. And he stops because he sees this woman in a room, and I think she's reading. And it is Felix's sister.
Allison? Or Allison? Is that the name?
No, Venetia.
Oh, Allison is the actress's name.
Yes, I had to look at her name again because I was like, wait, how do you pronounce this? Venetia. Um, and so she's like looking at him, and she kind of like scuffs or whatever. And she's like in this like showy little outfit. And she looks hot and like a bad bitch and whatever. Like, you go, girl. And Oliver just like looks at her and then like walks to the family room. And then Felix's mom is just like in his face with all these questions. And their friend Pamela is staying there with them because she's had a hard few years or something of that nature. And Pamela's like really interested in Oliver, like, doesn't want to move, like, just wants to sit there and like gawk at him, like, just stare at him or whatever. And the mom's like, "Yeah, so like, what's your relationship like with your mom? Oh, I'm so sorry about your dad. What happened to your dad? I heard he had alcohol problems." And I'm like, "Ma'am, relax. Like, it's whoa." And so even Felix like apologizes later, and he's like, "I'm sorry if my mom was a lot with all those questions." And Oliver was like, "No, it's fine." And like, I feel like we've all been through that, where we meet somebody or like somebody's family or whatever, and they start asking these like really personal questions. And a lot of time, or it's like our family members or whatever. And it's like, I don't know. Sometimes I don't care. And sometimes I'm like, I just I just met you, and I really don't feel comfortable talking to you about that. So I don't know where you got that information from, but that was like a lot. Please don't do that. Um
That's actually something I talk about all the time. Like, I'll have people ask me stuff and say stuff to me, and I'm like, Why did you think that was okay?
Mm-hmm. Boundaries, babe.
As a
It's
matter of
called
fact, I sent you a
boundaries.
text I got the other night, and I said,
Excuse me?
what made this person think that was okay for them to say that to me? I digress.
Oh, baby, I digress too. Because of
Mm,
that text message, ew. Don't gaslight me. Don't do
don't
it.
gaslight me. So
Don't don't turn this shit around on me. Bye. Bye. Bye.
gaslighting is real.
Oh, it really is, and it's gross. I'm not here for it. I don't
People
like.
use it, people use it in such, um, it's such a common term now, but, and sometimes people are like, oh, this person's gaslighting me, and it's not gaslighting at all. But
Yeah,
man, when people gaslight you, they gaslight you. It's wild.
I agree. And I do agree when you say like gaslighting is thrown around a little too much. And I think it's because people don't quite understand what gaslighting is. Um,
Hmm.
there's times where I question it too. If I'm like, was that gaslighting? Um, but majority, I would say, of the time, it is what it is. Um, but I think the biggest thing is like understanding and respecting boundaries. That's like a huge thing, and that's why communication is so key. um yeah, but yeah, that definitely threw me a little bit. I was like, damn, she's kind of nosy, and she's like, there's nothing wrong with being forward, but there was just something about how easily everything just came out of her mouth to Oliver that I was like, babe, that was like a lot. Like I wouldn't even know what to say at that point. um and then you have like your son apologizing on your behalf. Like
Yeah.
it was
It's
just
kind of like
wild. So
sometimes you have that family member that you just have to apologize for sometimes, and I think Felix is used to that.
yeah. So yeah, and then every night at dinner they dress up, and like it's like black tie, kind of like very like show offy dress or whatever kind of thing. And I thought that was also very interesting. Um but they go to dinner and Pamela is talking to Oliver about some stuff. And I feel like Pamela and Oliver related like a lot. Obviously Oliver didn't show that, but I personally could see it in his eyes, like how he listened to Pamela. He could relate in a lot of ways to her. And then it got to a point where Pamela brought up that she had found a place, and it was a flat. I can't remember who she said the flat what like whose it was. um
Mhm.
I don't think that was grammatically correct, but you get my gist. um
The father's like,
yeah, the dad's like, tell her she needs to go. And she's like literally dropping hints to Pamela, like, oh, like, what am I gonna do without you? I'm like, girl, you are so fucking fake for that. Rude. And
hmm,
then she just kept like interrupting Pamela. And there was part of me that honestly felt that Pamela did understand the cues of that they wanted her out of there. She just got so used to being around them that she was like silently hoping that they would just let her still stay, because
hmm,
from what I gathered as they talked about Pamela, it's almost like she had nobody else and she had
yeah,
nothing else, and she was scared to be alone, but she also like wanted to make some effort to leave because she's been with them for so long, kind of thing. And there were just so many signals that she silently gave and nobody was listening to her, and it's like she was screaming inside. And you know, I felt really bad for her. I felt for
Mhm.
her. Um, I think she
Well,
just
it
really
is.
wanted to be heard and cared for.
When you see them, even though the everybody seemed, like fairly nice, it is like they're very privileged, like very just like everything, and I don't know, it's like this feeling you get towards them a little bit where
Yeah.
I don't know, it's kind of like and not because they're rich or anything like that, but it's kind of like okay, I kind of like them, but something is a little
Off.
yeah,
Very much so.
yeah.
Very much so. We move forward a little bit and find out that the dad ended up, getting her to leave quietly in the middle of the night, um, in order to not upset his wife. Um, and Oliver's like, oh, like she's gone. And he kind of looked sad. And that's how I took it, at least. And that's why I'm saying, like, he actually really understood what she was saying, how she was feeling, but he didn't really show it. He just listened, and you can just see it in his eyes, at least from my POV while watching the film.
So part of me now, after watching the film, looks at that part a little differently, where it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like, oh, you guys got rid of her, and like you might get rid of me too. That's where I kind of look at it now.
No, and I can definitely understand what you're saying there for sure. I don't think he felt that until a little later, personally. And granted, I might change my mind because I definitely want to rewatch the film again and like try to pick out what I missed some of, if that makes sense.
It's gonna be
Um,
it's knowing what you know about him in the end and then watch it. I always watch I not always, but usually watch movies that I enjoy or really have to think about twice
yeah,
because I look at it through a totally different lens, knowing about the characters.
absolutely. Um, yeah, I don't and like I said, I really think he did not feel that way until a little bit later in the film. And the reason why I say that we'll get into. Um, but I think it was more of shock and not sadness, but like it made him think. It did make him think, like, oh, like why did they do that? Or I think it was shock. And I think a lot of people don't realize the relation that Pamela and Oliver had. Um, could be wrong, and maybe a lot of people did realize that. But um, jumping forward again,
You look scared.
because this part scared me. Like, scared me a lot. In a short, obviously, amount of time, we see Oliver and Venetia talking, and they have these moments, and you can tell Venetia's interested in him. Like
hmm
she's like, I can see why my brother likes you. And I'm like,
You said,
oh,
okay, girl.
all right,
Okay.
girl. I was like, you're not hiding. All right. You get it, girl. And hmm,
Doesn't the one
well,
scene though happen before this, or am I wrong?
the
That I
vampire.
before the vampire.
Yeah, that's the one where they like really first initially talking because he came outside in just boxers and a blanket around him. And that's where
No, no,
she's
no.
like,
No, the one scene. I don't want to
oh,
say it.
where uh Felix is enjoying himself in the bathtub.
Yep.
Well, there was a couple occasions of that. I'm gonna be so straight. I don't know if I could ever do that in a movie. So
So
honest, I don't know if I could do it.
I don't know if I goes the way.
But what
Um,
rubbed me the wrong way with that,
we're talking about the bathtub scene, by the way.
yes. So what happens is Felix is in the bath and the bathroom door is cracked. So Oliver
First mistake.
first mistake, absolutely. He hears Felix pleasing himself because he's groaning, and he's like, "Oh, like what's going on in there?" And so he like sneaks up to the door, which is again cracked open, and he watches him do his thing, as men do, and not watching, but like, Jesus help me. Um, dear Lord. Um,
We'll get through this.
we're
We'll
gonna
get
get
through
through this
this.
because the other thing is gonna be way harder for me to get through. Um,
I think that one will be easier for me to get through.
that this is the funny part is it'll be easier for you and harder for me. Um,
You could take the
but
reins on this one.
uh, so he's Yankee Doodle Day, and this right now. Okay, so yeah, he does his thing. He releases purely, and
Surely.
he gets out, he gets ready for bed. Oliver comes in, he's like, "Oh, good night, mate." And the tub is draining.
But it's not quite drained.
Not yet. And
Not yet.
not yet. He sticks his face in the water and he's slurping the water that he released in. And I was like, wow. So first of all, that was my first time of like, oh my gosh, is this man bisexual? But also, is he in love with Felix?
That was what I like the way he was even at Oxford. I was like, oh, he has a crush on this person.
I agree.
That's why I that's why I thought this story was gonna go in a whole different direction. I thought that
Yeah.
it was gonna be where Oliver, no, sorry, that Felix finds out Oliver likes him and he's like, whoa, man, you know, and then it just goes from there, and that was not how it went. So,
No. And because I even like at the top of the film, right at the beginning, when he's talking, he even says he's like, was I in love with him? And he basically like eventually does say, like, no, I loved him,
but I wasn't
but
in
I
love with
also
him.
hated him.
Hmm.
And there was so much within that right there that again that happens at the end, so we'll get to that. But like
Very telling.
it was very telling. But I was very taken aback by that. I was like, all right, Bill.
You do you, boo.
Yeah, enjoy that water.
Um,
um okay.
yeah, that was that, and that has become like the scene that everybody talks about now is the bathwater scene.
Oh baby, the other scene that shall be coming up, I thought was way, way more like I literally cannot put to words. I was like,
Well, the thing is, the bathtub water is not just that. That's also like like you're taking but like all of your body ick is in that water. So it's just that it was like Oliver's character was literally taking in every part of him. That's kind of how I looked at it, at least. I don't know.
No, no, no. I definitely understand what you're saying. I don't know.
The
Like,
writer
there's
might be
just
like, Ashley, that is not what I was going for, but
I don't know. Like, there's just something about like that scene and a couple others that we're about to talk about that like I don't know. It's not that like parts of me were uncomfortable and then parts of me were like I could
well,
I don't know how to put it into words.
for me, those are the best type of movies, are the ones that make me feel uncomfortable.
Absolutely,
Because,
because
yeah. Hmm.
that was one of the parts where I paused the movie and I Snapchatted you and I was like, "Girl, what's going on?
What's going
What is
on?
going on?"
Well, I think, and I know this isn't necessarily like a horror movie, but I think it's been big in the horror community
Mm-hmm.
because it's very uncomfortable. But I think, and I love gory movies, but I
Same.
think a lot of times people will be like, "Oh, I want to make this like extreme horror film, so I'm just gonna put all the gore into it." And sometimes I think that actually takes away from the movie. Like this film did not have really much gore, or really barely any at all, but it made you feel uncomfortable. It made you feel gross.
Mm-hmm.
It made you feel all these feelings, and you didn't have to see someone getting hacked into pieces or chopped up or something like that. And I think that's a very unique, proves to be a good filmmaker and storyteller if you're able to do that. Again, I love gore,
Yeah.
but I think sometimes to be able to get that in movies where you get that like feeling and all these other with a film that barely has any gore, none at all, I think that's a great storyteller.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. And there's like just situations I'm sure that's been in like other like foreign kinds of films because when it comes to like sex and foreign films, like
No
baby,
boundaries.
they go for it. No cap. Well, because we've talked about sex previously. And girl, like, I don't know. The thought of it just scares me. And I don't know, maybe if it's like my insecurities that I have on myself that I'm like trying to work on, trying to heal, trying to dissect. But like, sex is scary for me. I don't know what it is. It's just like, I don't know, because it's such an intimate thing to me. And I know it is for you that, girl, I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, so like, that happened and it very much like shocked me. This man brushed his teeth, washed his face, and then stuck his whole face, rubbed it everywhere, sucking up that water. And I'm like, you got to clean your face again.
It made me nervous. He was getting close to the drain, and drains get moldy, and ugh, it's a lot. It's a lot.
There was just everything about
There
that
was a
scene that I
lot
was
going
like,
on.
it's like, oh, babe. He said, and I said,
Was it the same night or what that he saw Venetia outside? And I don't know if I'm saying her name right.
I think it is. I think it's pronounced Benicia. Well, because like I said, they had that first encounter where he came outside in just his boxers and a blanket. And I want to say that was right before the bathroom scene, if I'm not
I'm
mistaken.
sorry.
Oh no,
I'm
you're
sorry.
fine. No, you're fine. You're fine. You're fine. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. Because again, there's so much to dissect with this movie. But that's where they really had like their first encounter and she was like checking him out and like very much like being flirtatious and like being like, "Hey, boo," and I was like, "You go, girl," and she that's when she was like, "Oh, I see why my brother likes you very much," and he's like awkward and just it's like adorable almost. You're like, oh, look at him. He's like all awkward and stuff. You're like, ah. And then he goes and does what he does in the bathtub with after Felix does what he does. And then he sees Venetia outside of his window late at night in a see-through gown.
Because they get pretty like hot and heavy pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Um,
He's
yes,
when
you're
he
right. I'm
comes
sorry about
out,
that.
no, you're good, you're good. When he comes outside first, the biggest thing is that she's having eating problems. And so the first thing he does is he tries, not tries, he just does it. He's like very dominant. And he's
Mhm.
like, you're going to eat and you're not going to leave the table until you are done eating everything that's on like your plate. Do you understand? And I was like,
And she was like kind of shocked
whoa.
that
I was
he
like,
noticed.
I was like, um, then he moves in front of her and he's like kneeling in front of her and he starts getting like really close to her. And then he goes to touch her. She's like, oh, like it's not the right time of the month. And I was like, oh no.
But
Continue.
he does. He, he does
Yeah.
his thing with his fingers. And I hope I don't get this. Sorry, I made it awkward.
No, you didn't make it awkward. I'm just like, it's just okay. Listen,
And
because I feel like I want to clarify this real quick too, because people who watch this are gonna be like, damn, like, why is she like so like ah! About it? And I'm like, I think the biggest thing is like, I've never done any of that. And so, like, watching it, you're like, whoa, oh my gosh. And, but then there's another side of it that, first of all, you, sir, you will not touch me while I'm on my time of the month. Absolutely not. Like,
well, I think that's a big thing that girls worry about in general is being and guys not being okay with it. So I think that's why this was like, because she's like, hey, I'm on my period. And he's like,
I'm a
lucky for you,
vampire.
I'm a vampire,
And I
which
was
I wore
like,
my Dracula with vampire teeth shirt today
I was
just for that
internally
scene.
screaming. I was
Yeah.
internally screaming. I was like,
And
what is happening? And I think, again, because I've never been through any kind of situation like that with somebody on top of her being on her time of the month, everything that was happening, I was just like,
well, yeah, and that's also something that in like at least that I've seen in other movies or just heard about in real life that's kind of taboo where the guy will actually be upset at the girl if she's on her period or will get mad or something if there's blood. So I think it's something for a lot of people for him to be like, well, it's okay in a sense. He didn't care.
oh
And
no, he did not.
he went on to taste it and then he he let her taste it
He was
and
rubbing it all over
then
her body.
that is true.
And then they
Another
had a
thing is
heated makeout session. And then he,
then he performed the oral sex on her.
And
And
Farley saw it.
I wonder if he could see everything though.
Well,
Probably not.
yeah,
He probably would have been scared.
well, with the way
Um,
that camera angle was, oh yeah, he saw him down and dirty,
down and dirty.
all up in that thing.
But I think that scene, and why I say this, and I'm probably getting way too philosophical and far too deep into this than it needs to be. But the I think that him being okay with her being on her period and even like welcoming it and accepting it and everything just gave her more of that trust in him.
Mm-hmm.
And he gained more of her trust
Yeah.
that he wanted from her.
Yeah.
So in a way, even though it's like this like kind of like bizarre and taboo scene, I think it was very important and very telling.
Oh, for sure. Because the next morning, it was like you almost thought it was like adorable the way those two were acting. Like he was making sure she was eating. He gave her his croissant and she was like sitting there smiling, enjoying her meal. Everything seemed great. And you're like, but what happened the night before? That was a whoa, whoa. But it that you just also see this like cute moment with them at breakfast. But
Mhm.
Felix is mad. He's annoyed at something. And Oliver's trying to talk to him. And he's just, Felix is not having it. He's
And
like,
Oliver could not have Felix upset.
no, he can't. He can't. And
He
so
cannot.
his mother brings up doing something for Oliver's birthday. And the dad and mom are like talking about it a little bit. Oh, like 100, 200 guests. And I'm like, what? And then Oliver, or not Oliver, Felix ends up like speeding off or whatever, and then so does Venetia for some reason. And I can't quite remember why. So I have to watch that scene again. I obviously I'm gonna rewatch the movie again, but um Oliver goes and looks for Felix and finds him by the pool. And Oliver's like, oh, like, are you mad at me? Like, you seem annoyed. And he's like, I'm not annoyed. And I'm like, why are you acting like a kid? Like,
Clearly, you're annoyed.
but, and so finally he reveals, like, well, Farley told me that you had a thing with my sister. And that's where, like you mentioned, he was like, no. And he's so collected. He knows
Hmm.
exactly what to say to please Felix. And I was
Yep.
like, this man is crazy. And he tells him like, yeah, she tried to kiss me, but I politely declined and that was it. And so Farley's just trying to start trouble. And I was like, there's so many lies. So many lies. Because Felix also goes into like, oh, like my ex best friend Eddie, you know, he came here last year and he had a thing with Venetia and it just like pulled us apart and made things really awkward and we had to make him leave and like all this shit. And so that's when, you know, Oliver was like, no, like Farley's just trying to start trouble. Like, why would I do that to you? Why, like,
Yeah.
no, I just politely declined her. No, you didn't. You definitely did not.
You
But, you
definitely did
know,
not.
do you, boo?
Hmm.
Um, and so that's when he wait, actually, I think this happened after his party. No, it was before. No, it was before. Where he goes into Farley's room.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
And this is where I felt heavily. I'm like, that man is bisexual. he's bisexual and he's like, I'm like, I, Barry as an actor in this movie, that's why I said before, like, I would love to talk to him and just pick his brain a little bit because this role, it was just done with such calculation and, in my opinion, such a perfection.
Mhm.
Like, Oliver has very, very many deep layers in many different ways with a lot of different things, a lot of different people in that film, character wise. And so, like I said, he goes into Farley's room and he's again like being dominant like he was with Venetia. And he was
Mhm.
like, "Oh, are you going to be a good boy?" And I was like, "What is happening?" And then he,
That's
please, listen.
that scene, yeah, that scene was uncomfortable for many reasons, like because they hate each other, but yet they're having like this really like intimate, uh, I don't know the word. Um,
Moment? Moment.
yes,
Yeah.
moment.
Oh,
Um,
I think Farley liked it. He just didn't want to admit it. I think Farley very much liked that.
Farley, man, you gotta pick a side.
You either don't like Oliver or you do. Like, which one is it?
Get it together. Get it together.
And yeah, he makes sure Farley's very much taken care of. And he's like, "Tell me, like, you're gonna be good. You're gonna be on good behavior." And I was like, "Lord help me." Damn. I was like, "Okay. Yes, sir."
Yes, sir. Yeah, that was a very interesting scene. But there's a scene where Felix's sister, is outside um Oliver's window waiting for him again to come out, and he doesn't come out, and I felt so heartbroken for her.
I
Like
agree.
it was just
I honestly thought that he was going to keep sneaking around with her. And then I I think the biggest reason why he didn't was in fear of being caught that next time around,
I
obviously.
well, I think he was afraid of losing Felix, so he was like, "Oh, well, I'm not gonna do anything with her, so I
Yeah.
don't lose Felix as a friend." And it just goes to show how crazy he was about Felix.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and that's why, like, I'm gonna hold that thought because that'll be more towards the end. Because there's also a point in the movie that Oliver is talking to Felix's mother, and they're talking about, that's where he finds out, and this was actually before he went outside and they had their moment that Farley saw outside. Um the mother admits that she has an eating problem. That's where he finds out. And he had also grown to notice that at the table and whatnot. But, you know, then Oliver also says to the mom, like, well, it must be hard for her with you as her mother. And she's like, well, what do you mean? And then he just was like, because you're fucking beautiful. And I was just like, sir, what are you doing?
What are you doing?
Like, you are flirting with everybody. And it's wild.
He literally did.
He flirted with the mom, he flirted with, well, he was trying to be like Felix. He, did some
Felix.
stuff with Venetia and then he did some stuff with Farley. And I was like, what is he doing? Like, that's where it started to, like, because there were so many things going on with so many different characters. I'm like, what is he doing? Like, there, and that's why I keep saying, like, he's just so layered and there's so many different things happening. Right before his birthday party, um, Felix is like, oh, like, I'm going to take you on a little surprise trip. And at one
Oh,
point,
but wait, before that, I don't know if you remember,
mhm,
after the situation with Farley, then the next morning he gets kicked out.
yes,
The dad kicks him out because he got word that he was trying to sell stuff in the house that was
yeah.
the father's.
And that was obviously Oliver, like, framing him so he could have
He's like,
Felix and
okay.
everybody all to himself. And
Mhm.
then we get into him taking him on a surprise trip. And he notices after a while, I think he had fallen asleep during the drive. And when he wakes up, he sees the sign to his hometown. And he's like, no, 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 no. Like, we need to go back. Like, please take me back. And Felix is like, no, like, I'm not going to take no for an answer. Like, we're going to go see your mom. We're going to see if she's okay. She actually called you the other day, and I ended up picking up the phone and talking to her, and she really misses you and she's concerned about you and she wants to see you. She sounds like she's sober, like she's doing better. Like, I won't take no for an answer. I want you to go see your mom. And
Yeah.
he pulls up, and you see this, like, normal, picture perfect family home, and
House.
the town seems like quiet and relaxing, and mom opens the door and hugs her son and says,
And you
oh,
can tell that she is not someone abusing substances, or
yeah.
you can tell she is living a very like happy, healthy, normal life.
And then
The real kicker.
says, oh, yeah, your father's in the back. I'll go let him know you're here. Felix, it's nice to meet you. Why don't you come on in? And Felix was like, what? I thought daddy died and mommy was crazy. What is happening? So they go, well, not we, but we see them go inside and everything. They're sitting down with his mother and father, and Oliver looks like he's about to lose his fucking mind. He's
And
like,
Felix is like having the time of his life. He's like, yeah, so tell me more about that.
yeah, very sarcastic because you can tell he's
Mm-hmm.
angry. He's
Mm-hmm.
like, this motherfucker lied to me. And
Yep.
then Oliver has sisters. Oliver has these parents that really care about him, and they're like, oh, we've been worried about him, and he's at the top of his class at Oxford, and like all these things that Felix was like, huh, must have missed this, huh, very interesting, huh, huh. And then that's where, like, Oliver's like, we we need to go back, like, I'm gonna miss my party. And then Felix just ends up being like, just sit the fuck down and like chill out and take a fucking pill. Like, we'll
Mm-hmm.
go back soon. And
Mm-hmm.
you can hear the anger in his voice. But and Oliver's like, fuck me. I fucked up and he found out. And the drive back was quiet, awkward, and they get back to Saltburn, and Oliver's just like, very, I think he starts crying at this point, if I'm not mistaken. And he's very emotional, and he's like, listen, like, I just wanted you to be my friend. And that's where you're like, oh fuck. Like,
Yeah.
you feel bad
Mm-hmm.
because although he lied and made up some fucked up shit, and on top of that has done a few fucked up things already in itself, um, you feel bad for him because, again, as I've said before, all he wanted was a friend. And he cared about Felix and he loved Felix. And he also openly admits very soon, like, if I think it was at his party, he admits this. I don't think it was during this scene, but he's like, I put on a show for you. I did everything for you to keep you in my life. And unfortunately, it was like basically like, unfortunately, you found out I lied, but like, I care about you. I love you. You're my best friend. And I just wanted you to be my best friend. And you're like, fuck, dude.
Hmm.
This poor guy just wants a friend. Cause even his parents were like, yeah, like he's kind of like a loner, basically. Like he doesn't really have many friends. So it's nice to see he has a friend. And you're like, this is crazy. Like, what else is he lying about?
I remember thinking about that scene, like if I was Felix, what I would do in that situation, because it's
Mm-hmm.
like it's so heartbreaking, but also to be lied about, like lied to about, I don't know. I don't know, but I think it makes it more for, I think I understand why Felix was so angry because it's like I let you stay with my family and all, and you know, and I don't know who you really are, and almost like this unsafe feeling, like who the heck is in my house
Yeah.
type thing.
Well,
But
because
yet I felt so heartbroken for Oliver.
yeah. Well, because again, you also think about like right before they went to Saltburn, they had this ball at Oxford or whatever. And Felix had a moment with Oliver when he admitted his father died. And he's like, oh, like I do this thing where I just like write the name of the person who passed or whatever on a rock and then I throw it. It's like as if I'm like saying goodbye and letting go. He's like, oh, it's like kind of stupid. But it's like a very touching moment between the two because Felix is finally letting him in more.
Hmm.
Um, and that's when again their like friendship started to blossom and then they go to Saltburn and then we come again to what we were just talking about where he goes and to take him to see his mother and he lied about basically his entire life and I can understand why you're saying like oh Felix feels like he has somebody in his home that he truly doesn't know and he feels unsafe. Like, again, that's where it's like, what else has he lied about already? And
Hmm.
so having Felix be angry drove him to a
Devastated him.
very bad place, a
Hmm.
very bad place. So they have this birthday party for him, this huge fucking crazy party for him. And I was like, damn, this is a good ass party. I want to go. Um, and
And
but
it's
he,
it's also, sorry to interrupt you.
you're good.
It's not, just Felix too. Like at this point, he's also burned that bridge with Venetia
Yeah.
because she even says like, "Oh, my brother got to you," or something like that. Because so he doesn't have her anymore, even though I mean that's kind of his fault. He kind of just gave up on her. So, Farley doesn't like him. Now Felix doesn't like him. Venetia doesn't like him. He's losing out on everybody. But yes, the party.
Yes. So that party was wild. It was badass. I was like, all right, all right. And because Oliver is in his feels and he's like devastated that Felix is basically hates him right now. Because Felix told him, he goes, I think you should leave after the party. Because it's already too late. Like things are gonna start, like people are gonna start showing up within like the next hour or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's like, please don't make me leave. Like, can we please talk about this? And he's like, please don't tell your parents. And he's like, fuck no, I'm not gonna tell them. Are you crazy? And just like leaves him alone. And so then of course, like I said, we get into the party and um we see like all of these people, and it's obvious that Oliver doesn't really know many of them. It's just like a lot of random people there to celebrate him, which I feel like was probably very weird for him, especially within the state he
Mhm.
was already in with like Venetia being mad at him, Farley having issues with Farley, and then Felix like basically hating him for doing what he did. And so he ends up getting really, really drunk. And it comes to a point where he runs into somebody that's wearing this mask that's a horse, and they take off the mask and it's Farley, and that's where Oliver, you know, like um Farley does some cocaine, and Oliver tries to be like snippy, and he's like, you shouldn't be here, like if they find out you're here, they're gonna like flip out. And Farley was like, no, they're not. Because first of all, I was invited, but secondly, you know, you don't belong here. Like this, to you, this is like some dream, something you wish you had, but this is my life. They are like my friends, my family. Like they really don't fucking care about you, kind of thing. And that, I think, really, really killed him. And
Yeah.
so he went to find Felix. And at one point, he sees Felix doing cocaine as well with a couple people. And Oliver's like, oh, like, can we please talk? And he's like, no, fuck off, basically. Like, why don't you just get the fuck out and leave me alone? And that just, like, all of those things, like, just really, really pushed him. Next morning, they can't find Felix after well, and let me backtrack a smidge, because Oliver follows Felix into this maze where Felix
Because
is
of
like,
course they have a maze.
yeah, literally. uh Felix is going to like have some fun with a girl. And he does, until Oliver interrupts, and the girl's like, ugh, like, have you been watching us? Did you follow us? Like, oh, you guys are pervs. And then she leaves, and Felix is like, fuck, dude, like, I was like, what the fuck? And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is wild. And they get into like a little argument, and Oliver throws up, and he again, like, Oliver's very emotional, and he's like, I just wanted you to be my friend, and I did all of this because I care about you and I love you and you're my friend and blah blah blah. And Felix was just not having it. He's like, that's basically, like, that's just fucked up. Like, what do you mean? And then before Oliver leaves the maze, he shoves this bottle into Felix's hand that he drinks. And then, like I said, within the next morning, nobody can find Felix. So they're going in the lake, they're covering the grounds, they're looking everywhere. And then the mother goes into the maze and finds that Felix is dead. And I was like,
It was a devastating moment.
I was like, pause. What the fuck just happened? Like, how do you kill him? Like, honestly, Felix character, like, Jacob Elordi playing Felix, like, because of his other roles that he's played, like, I thought Felix was, I mean, all in all, a good guy. Like, he was including, and he tried to, like, give Oliver a chance. And then, after everything, like, he rightfully was pissed off at Oliver. And I don't think he hated him. I think he did not know what to do. And he was just like basically asking to just have that space. Like, please just give
Yeah.
me space and leave me the fuck alone. And Oliver didn't get that cue, and he did what he did. Now Felix is dead. And we're all like, what I found very wild was the dad comes in after Farley, Venetia, the mom were already there, and then Oliver was the last one to follow in. But like, the dad was like, "Oh, my boy, like, you got to wake up, like, wake up." And
Yeah.
I don't know, and like, not that they weren't emotional or like sad or anything. It was just very, very um interesting acting choices, in a sense of I was just like, what is all going on with this family? Very bizarre. And so, they go back to eat breakfast. Venetia's like, I don't even really know how to describe her emotion. She was just like, it's like she was disassociating
Yeah, yeah.
and she was absolutely devastated. And the mom and dad tried to keep it, again, not that they weren't emotional, because they just lost their son, but there was something that was different for me and how I would view losing a child. um
It's like they were trying to keep themselves together and try to go on in a
yeah,
sense.
or like believe that he wasn't dead.
Yeah.
And so, Farley's emotional and crying and all this shit. And so Oliver is like talking to the mom and dad and like going along basically with what they are doing, which is
Yeah.
trying to just act like everything's fine. And
Yeah.
it seems like the mom and dad very much appreciate that, because then you have Farley who's like, I can't fucking eat. Like, this isn't okay. Like, why are you guys just sitting here, like, acting like nothing happened and like all this shit? And then he looks at Oliver and he's like, why the fuck is he still here? And I was like,
Hmm.
oh. And, you can see Oliver is very emotional, but he's also trying to keep it together, like Felix's mom and dad. And that's where, well, prior to, like, literally a few seconds prior to that, the dad was like, Farley, just sit the fuck down and eat. Like, you're not the only one who has feelings at this table. And that's where you like
Hmm.
finally kind of see, like, oh, they're really just trying to keep it together. um
Yeah. Yeah.
but that's when Oliver's like, funny, because I wasn't the one doing cocaine the night someone died. And I was like,
Yeah.
and the dad was like, what? And then Farley's like, I'm sorry. Ugh. And then the dad, I think it was Duncan, told Duncan, like, go check his room or go have the police, or no, not the police, because he said he wouldn't tell the police. And that's the last thing you'll ever get. Now, like,
Yeah.
get the
Yeah.
fuck out, basically.
Hmm.
And so they have a funeral for Felix.
So, yeah, so after Farley is like banished, like cut off financially, um, they Oliver goes and visits Felix's grave. And he lays flowers like pretty normal, but then he just gets completely naked and how do I put this into words? Gets a little
Um, he, well, first he like lays on the grave and just sobs. And then after time passes, it's just pouring down rain. And he suddenly like gets up on his knees and he starts undressing himself. And then he proceeds to take his penis and stick it in the dirt and starts like making love to
That's what I was gonna say, but I
Felix.
thought it was gonna sound weird. But
No,
yeah, that's
that's
literally what it is.
that's literally what it is. Except he's not like, oh my gosh, this makes it even weirder to phrase it like this, but it's what it is. He's not in Felix technically, but he's like imagining that as he's banging his grave. And I was just like, yeah, this guy has some problems. And wow, wild, wild shit.
That was a very, I don't think because I've seen in other films like necrophilia and things like that, but I don't think I've ever seen that with a grave. And again, I think that was as uncomfortable. I think it was a very important scene to
100%.
show where his mindset was, to show how he felt about Felix, like everything. It was like, yeah, the scene, I I don't know how to put it into words, but I think it was inappropriately appropriate and necessary, if
No,
that makes any sense.
I 100% agree with you, and it does make sense. And like I said, these uncomfortable scenes that were in the film, as uncomfortable as they were, as wild as they were, damn, were they honestly important to
Mm-hmm.
Oliver's character. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate every person that was involved in this film for taking the risks that they took and just full fucking throttle, like going for it.
Yeah.
It's a very wild film, but damn, was it beautifully shot, beautifully executed, and just amazing. And so I very much appreciate the art of it all. Um,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
after because the mom um kind of insists that he stays longer.
yes. Oh
And
yeah,
you
yeah, 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 yeah.
see and you see Venetia, like, it's wearing on her.
It bothers her that the mom still wants him there because
Mm-hmm.
Venetia, although she had an interesting relationship with her brother and they didn't always see eye to eye, damn, did she care about and love her brother to death. And that was very, very visible the moment they were at breakfast and she like overflowed her glass. It was evident after, they had the funeral and they were on the bridge and they dropped a rock in the little lake that they have for Felix. And when they were in that little room and Venetia was having a cigarette, the mom was sitting there, the dad was sitting there, and the mom was like, "Oh, please don't leave. Like, please, like you can stay. Like, please tell me you're not leaving yet." And again, you can see Venetia be like, "Are you fucking kidding me?"
You said this, and I meant to say something to go back a little bit about the scene where Venetia was pouring into the glass and just kept pouring and pouring. I think you hit, what is it, the nail on the head or whatever, or the head on the nail, with how she was like completely disassociated.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was the that whole scene itself, I think, showed all the different levels. I mean, not all, but how everybody deals with grief differently.
Yeah.
And I thought that disassociation was perfect for her character and made so much sense.
Yeah.
And just because it's kind of like she was in this zone and you see it build and build and build this distress
Mm-hmm.
until we have the moment where she is in the bathtub
Mm-hmm.
and she just releases everything.
Yeah. If this is too personal, you don't have to answer it. Have you ever disassociated?
Yes. So I am trying to think. It just, I still have some issues with it now, actually, but
Same.
not as bad as what I did. But it's it's where sometimes I usually know I'm doing it, but
Same.
I can't get back. Like I have to find ways to ground myself or some people will notice it too if you're
Yeah.
disassociating, which is kind of uncomfy.
Yeah.
And I've actually gotten to a point where sometimes I can be like, I'm disassociating.
Yeah. I've
Um,
done that a few times when I'm on the phone with my parents. For some reason, my eyes just, and I'm like, I can't break it. I know I'm disassociating. I don't know what's happening. I can hear you and I'm listening and I can still talk to you, but I cannot break it right now. Like it just has to happen. And it doesn't, it normally isn't like a long period of time, but it's a weird thing to feel, man. Like I don't know how to explain it.
it's like this response that your body does to protect you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people develop it after something traumatic,
Mm-hmm.
um, which I don't like to use the word traumatic for me, but the dis when I started to disassociate lines up with certain things that had happened from when something happened to then where I started to disassociate.
Right.
And so it was weird because when she did that, I related so much to that moment
Mm-hmm.
because, and not where I don't, not where I've been like sitting there pouring a glass and just kept, pouring it or stuff like that, but there has been situations where it's similar to something like that.
100%. I agree with you. I've never done that myself either, but I definitely, there was just something about she kept pouring, she kept pouring, she kept pouring. And I'm like, and then she's just like breathing heavily and she's just staring. And I'm like, she's disassociating. Oh my
Mm-hmm.
gosh. And she doesn't know how to process any of this. And there's so many different emotions happening at that table that you're like, oh my gosh, like this is just wild. And
Mm-hmm.
then, as you did mention as well, when we get to the bathtub scene, Oliver comes in, she's in the bath, and she basically just looks at him and is like, she's like emotional and she is crying, but she's almost like laughing. And that's how she is. She's like, and like, you are still fucking here and you I don't understand what the fuck you're still doing here.
Your
Like,
mouth.
yeah, it didn't she said something like her dad said something about how he's Spider-Man or whatever, and he's like, oh, and she gets so like articulate here that I was like, oh my gosh, she is killing this scene. And she's just like, you're weaving your little web. And I'm like, gosh, it's like I correct me if I'm wrong. She says like he doesn't he did not care about you, dude. Like you just show up and all of a sudden all these problems start happening and uh, like you're just like what the fuck, dude? Like you're I'm trying to figure out how to like explain it. Like she just calls him out on shit that nobody else like Farley like he was probably one of the only ones that really noticed this facade.
Mm-hmm.
And um
I think she got really deep into it where, like, ever since you came in, everything has just fallen apart with the family you destroyed, and then saying very almost poetic and philosophical, mean things to him, calling him a moth and a serf and a spider,
mhm.
and just these. And it's weird, like, when they would show his facial expression when she would, I was like, couldn't really tell. I was like, what is he thinking as she's saying this?
Well, I think after losing Felix too, even though we ultimately end up finding out that it was his fault that he died. Um, he's gone. He's gone. He he shows sadness, but he almost at the same time shows nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
I
when you're
know.
like, whoa. After that conversation, like, I mean, they start kissing, and you're like, oh God, are they about to have like this aggressive, like makeup sex? Like, what's gonna happen? And she like pulls away and she's just like, why did I just do that? Like, why did I just kiss him? And then it like snaps to the next morning, and there is blood all over the floor, completely covered in the bathtub, and she's submerged up to like here in the water. And you're like, what the fuck is going on?
That scene, that camera angle, the scene, everything was so intense. Like that image was so disturbing and uncomfortable.
Well,
And
do you remember her eyes being like glazed over, but almost like pure white
yeah,
too?
it was wild.
It was wild. And I was like, oh my gosh, is this guy like killing them but able to get away with it? Like, what is going on? And of course, Farley's gone by now because, of course, the whole cocaine thing was brought up. And then after Venetia passed, the father pulls him into his like office or study, and he's
Which
like,
which when we see, by the way, we see the slits on her wrist to
yes,
show as if she, I think there's even, I can't remember who says it, but she couldn't live without Felix.
Oliver says that.
Hmm.
And he's like, yeah, she told me that she couldn't live without Felix. She couldn't do it.
Mhm.
And I was just like, okay. Um, and so the father pulls him into his office study, and he's like, I'm gonna need you to leave quietly without my wife knowing. How much money do you want? And Oliver, this is where, as I mentioned before, he's trying to still stay. And he's like trying to convince him, like, I think it's best that I don't leave. I think it's best that I stay here with you and your wife and like help you grieve. And he's like, no, like we would
Mhm.
really both appreciate to grieve in private and to be left alone. How much money do you want so you can leave? And the father just kept pushing, pushing. How much do you want? How much do you want? How much do you want? And I guess he caves. I can't remember if
They came to some agreement.
yeah. And so he leaves, and then there's this group of people outside. I think it was for Venetia's wake, I guess, or something, or like staff of Saltburn
Hmm.
or whatever. And somebody's just like, "See ya," and I was like,
Yeah, they're
"What the fuck?" And
bye.
so he leaves, and we time jump.
It's, I know it at least 6 months, something like that, because
Okay.
Oliver is in the cafe reading a newspaper, and it's about James, the dad, dying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when he so again, like you said, he's in the cafe and he's just typing away on a laptop, and their mother, Felix and Venetia's mother, comes in, and
How convenient.
yeah, literally. And she's like, she sees him through a mirror, and she's like, Oliver. And he looks up, and he looks all cleaned up, clean cut, looks like he has his life together, seems like he's working a job. Like he just presents himself as put together, successful, all the things. And so he apologizes about James, and he's like, she asks Oliver, like, how are you? Like, are you good? And he's like, not really. How are you? And she's like, are you good? Or he's like, you're good. Are you good? And she's like, not really. And she gets her flat white. And then before she leaves, she says, why don't you go back up to Saltburn? There's nobody there. Just go. Bad. Bad. Talking about at the beginning, how it opens is he's doing a little opening, talking to somebody. And we see glimpses of things that were going to happen. And actually, even before that encounter, we are shown how exactly everybody that died. Felix was given an alcoholic beverage that had a lethal amount of cocaine that Felix ingested, and then my obvious thought is his heart combusted from the amount of cocaine that he drank and had already done prior,
Yeah.
and he died. uh Oliver clearly assisted in Venetia's death, which
Mhm.
was wild to me, on top of already killing somebody he loved and cared about, and yada yada yada. And then when we get to the end, we find out he is talking to their mother, who is literally on her deathbed somehow.
Literally.
Literally. She's on a
Mhm.
ventilator. I think it's a ventilator. Like one of those tubes is down her throat to
Tubes
like
down
help
her
her
throat.
breathe. Like, I
Hmm.
mean, like, I'm like,
Yeah.
dude, you just killed the whole family. What in
And
the hell?
literally is telling the mother, yeah, I'm responsible for killing your children.
And that's when he does say, like, how I mentioned earlier, he says, I wasn't in love with him, but I did love him, but I also hated him.
Hmm.
And then we see all these flashes of, Felix getting all the women, and everybody loves Felix is a good guy, and he's the ladies man, and he could never do wrong. And Oliver's like, I fucking hated him, but I
Hmm.
loved him too. And I was like, and again, we see piece by piece he calculated all of this.
Every move.
He put a fucking pin in Felix's tire that day that he gave him the bike. He planted all this stuff on Farley to get him kicked out. He killed Felix. He killed Venetia. He killed the mom. I can't quite recall what happened to the dad.
I don't know. I actually don't know. I think maybe he did just become ill
Yeah.
and or whatever happened to him and died.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah,
know if
yeah.
there was anything um but
Yeah.
after he tells the mother all this and which this is another scene I thought was so wild is
Agreed.
when he literally pulls that tube out of her mouth.
Oh, he doesn't just pull it. He fucking full throttle yanks it out of her throat. And I was just like,
Said yeet. He
my
literally said
throat
yeet.
hurt because like, for people who've ever been in a hospital and have had to like have like a tube down their throat, I've heard many things as far as like, oh, like once that gets removed, it is painful and your throat's dry, it's sore, you feel like, oh my gosh, it's like painful at some capacity. It's almost like you're sick, from what I've
Have
heard.
you ever, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're okay, babe. Go ahead.
Have you ever had to have an endoscopy?
I don't think so. What is that?
It's they put you out for it and they put like a camera down your throat to see.
So That no, but because I was having trouble with my throat, I did get one like up my nose to like check everything. So like I went to an ear, nose, mouth doctor, whatever those are called, and
Were
they
you
had to put
awake?
it. Yes, yes, I was
No.
awake. I
Mm-mm.
can't quite remember what they did for me to not like feel uncomfortable, but like I mean, it was slightly uncomfortable. I'm not gonna lie, but they did. They put all the way up my nose, and so they somehow to check my fucking throat, and then like everything with my ears and everything. It was wild. And he's like, "Oh, like, are you good? Are you good? You okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm all right. I'm just chilling." It was you could feel it. Um, I had to sneeze a lot and blow my nose after that, but it was an experience and a half. And that's how I found out I had acid reflux.
That's so interesting because my experience with figuring out I had acid reflux was very different.
Yeah, I
Um,
still I still don't understand how like it going
I
up my nose dealt with it, but it did.
I think you need to sue.
I mean, I'm good, but I promise you it went up my nose.
I'm not good after that
I was like,
story.
that's wild. All the way up there,
I've
babe.
had
I felt it in my brain. Um, but that's what I mean. I don't
mm,
know how that all correlates. I don't know the body very well, like that.
I've had I've had two endoscopies. Thankfully I was out for both of them. But the one I remember my throat didn't hurt. But the second time I got it, my throat hurt and I was coughing and it was very odd.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't last for too long, but that is one of those scenes where you feel it. Like comas where she can hear everything but can't. So he's like telling her that, hey, I killed your family, and then is like real like trying to like comfort her, and then is like, yeet.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm. And then he's like hugging her, and it's almost like,
yeah.
oh, like you'll be okay. And I'm like, bruh. And then wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Yeah, this man, well,
Goodbye.
this man full throttled, butt ass naked, starts running around everywhere. And you can't tell me you didn't notice. You can't tell me. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle everywhere. And I was like, wow, he's really enjoying himself. He's having a good time. And I'm like, this is nuts. Like, it's murder on the dance floor. And he's just like, I'm butt naked. A. I'm running around the house. A. And he's enjoying life. And I'm like, this is wild.
Um,
You're welcome
again,
for the illusion of it all.
was very, what did you just say?
You're welcome for the illusion of it all. If
Oh,
that's the right phrase to use.
I thought you said something else. I'll tell you afterwards what I thought you said. Um,
I'm scared.
um, again, very awkward, cringy, uncomfortable scene,
Mm-hmm.
but because somehow through all that, he is able to get her to leave everything to him.
I don't know how that happened, but yeah.
And
Yep.
probably just because she's like, oh, you're the only person I have left, or something like that. So, and the way I actually looked at this scene is with him, why it was so important for him to be naked is because he was like, this is mine. Like, you wouldn't go in some random person's house and walk around naked. So he has like completely, like, this is now mine.
Mm-hmm.
And it is all his. He can dance around naked.
Honestly, overall, though, I really enjoyed the movie. Again, as I've said, beautifully shot, beautifully executed, wonderful acting, more than wonderful, was fucking fantastic in my opinion. So many layers, so many things to relate to on certain levels as well. And I just very much have an appreciation for this film. So I highly recommend it. Children, I would not recommend watching it with mom and dad though. But hey, if you have the balls, that's awesome. Me, I don't think I could watch this movie with my parents, and I'm 24. I digress.
Yeah, I loved the film, pleasantly surprised. I love the uncomfortable, cringy, awkward feelings. Those are my favorite type of movies. I'm very into twisted, messed up movies and anything. I think that's why I had people like, Ashley, you were gonna love this film. It is disturbing, it is gross, you will love it. And I'm like, okay,
I love that people know
I
that.
see how you all think of me. Um,
Oh
yeah,
shit.
so if it's gross, disturbing, or anything, I will most likely love it. Um, but yeah, cinematography, great, music, great, acting, lighting, it was just really, it was well done.
Agreed. Agreed.
Female writer, a female director, very
Period.
cool. Hmm.
But to see
Hmm.
that it came from a woman's perspective changes everything because there was a male lead.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's how I'm vibing with it. But the
Yeah.
writer director,
Yeah, I
fucking
agree.
fantastic. Fucking
Hmm.
fantastic. And I loved it. So bravo, babe. Bravo. Mwah.
I was trying to snap clap and it didn't work.
Period.
Um, but yeah, I'm glad you liked it. Um,
Same.
because I think it's one of those films. Well, I shouldn't say that. Because I was gonna say maybe one of those films that you either love or hate. I think it's one of the films you either love, hate, or just very confused by.
Yeah. See, I love detail in films. And so I think that's also what drew me in more is although I had all these different feelings, I was like, oh my gosh, the detail
Hmm.
in it is so specific in so
Yeah.
many ways. I loved it. I just loved every part of it. So, very much a huge thank you to the cast, the crew, the writer, director, all the actor. Like I can go on and on and on. It was just a, a really different film that I enjoyed and have appreciation for. And if you haven't watched it, go watch it. If you got balls, watch it with your mom and dad and your family.
Family event.
I think I'm gonna let Kimmy and JJ just take the reins on it. I don't know. Parents
I'm
look at their
comfy.
kids, they're like, oh, like you're gonna be my little boy forever, my little girl forever. And so when you like watch these more mature things with them, you're like, I don't know if I could do this. And then there's some
Every
families that
time
are like,
I,
I don't give a fuck. I'm just chilling. But I also
mhm,
I understand all sides of it. But just know it's a lot. So
every time I show like my dad like a movie like this, he's like, Ashley, where do you get these things? Like where does this come from?
I love it.
And my mom usually falls asleep, so
Oh, Sherry.
oh cheery.
Whoa. Oh,
Um, but yeah.
yeah, highly recommend guys go check out Saltburn now. It is on Amazon Prime Video. I'm not sure where else it's streaming or available, but I'm sure you can find it almost anywhere. But it is definitely on Amazon Prime Video. So yeah, thank you guys for joining us on another episode of Steel City Screams. Be sure to like, comment, and share. I will have some Indiegogo news coming soon for Never Return, and more details and whatnot. So feel free to comment any questions that y'all have. I'm really excited to get this thing going. I'm ready to make it. I'm ready to go. So yeah, thank you guys.
Let's make a movie.
Hey. Hey, hey. Goodbye, my angels.
Goodbye, my angels. Mwah.